friend of mine said the moon landing was faked, so I stopped talking to him. I mean, what kind of idiot still believes the moon is real? Chapter 3. The Moon Landing. On July the 20th, 1969, 3 astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin, took off from Kennedy Space Center in their spacecraft Apollo 11. Taking just 3 days to reach the moon, 2 of the astronauts, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, got into their lunar excursion module and began their descent down to Tranquility Base on the moon's surface. After 2.5 hours, and with only 40 seconds of fuel remaining, they successfully landed their module. Neil Armstrong was the first person to leave the module. Not cheese then. Armstrong set foot on the moon and said,
"That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind."
Millions of people were inspired by such an incredible achievement, but sadly, as with any other conspiracy theory, the local village idiots began to question the authenticity of such an excursion. So for the sake of the illiterate conspiracists amongst us, let me help educate you with the most common misunderstandings. Conspiracy number 1. If Neil Armstrong was the first man on the moon, well, who took his photo? Image meant everything to NASA, especially to keep the space programs funded by the government. With hundreds of millions of dollars invested, they're certainly not going to send people to the moon and not have a camera or 2 strapped to the outside of their lunar module. NASA installed cameras on every piece of the Apollo spacecraft and its module. After all, you don't travel 238,855 miles and miss the photo opportunity of the century. And besides, if the moon landing was fake, NASA would owe us all a huge apology. Moving on. Conspiracy number 2. How is the flag waving in outer space if there's no wind? It didn't. NASA knew a regular flag would hang lifeless, but if you're planning on taking a photo of patriotic imagery, the last thing you want is a limp flag in your photo. The astronauts simply inserted a pole through the top of the flag to make it look like it was waving in the wind. Speaking of patriotism, America is the land where people think the moon landings were fake.
But professional wrestling is real.
Conspiracy number 3. Where are the stars in the photos? Any photographer will tell you that this is simply due to the limited light exposure range. Cameras can only take in a certain amount of light. If the exposure is too high, everything will look too bright, and if it's too low, then everything will be too dark. With no atmosphere on the moon, the stars would appear so bright, reflecting from the sun, as would the moon's surface. If you don't believe me, next time you're out with friends on a clear night, take a selfie and see how many stars you can see. The answer will be none, as the exposure will be focusing on illuminating you and not the background. Conspiracy number 4. Why are the shadows in the wrong place? Well, they would be if the photo was taken here on Earth, but like we discussed in conspiracy number 3, the moon is super reflective. Look at the sky on a clear night and see how the moon illuminates the sky and even your street. Now imagine if you were stood on the moon, the uninterrupted sunlight bounces off its surface and becomes a reflective light source. Therefore, the softened shadow of the astronauts and the lunar module isn't completely cloaked in darkness. Conspiracy number 5. Why didn't the astronauts die from the radiation exposure? Apollo's hull shielded the astronauts from being exposed to lethal radiation just like any modern-day space shuttle. Once the spacecraft clears the Van Allen radiation belts,
this is the zone of energetic charged particles that are captured by and held around a planet by the planet's magnetosphere. A magnetosphere is a region of space surrounding an astronomical object in which charged particles are affected by the object's magnetic field.
They are only then exposed to natural background radiation. The astronauts were only on the moon's surface for a matter of hours, which, for this amount of time, the radiation environment is comparable to the Earth's own. If you're still unconvinced, there are several photos of the moon's surface which have now been taken over the past few decades, showing the Apollo lunar module exactly where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin parted over 50 years ago. Tens of thousands of people would have been involved in the moon landing project. And as I pointed out in chapter 1, where I debunked the flat earth conspiracy, have all of these people been interviewed by a secret society of elites and told to keep quiet? There is evidence that people turn to conspiracy theories as a way of feeling more in control of their lives. These pragmatic motivations show little evidence that believing in these theories actually helps people satisfy this need to feel control and independence. In fact, by believing in these theories, people may actually be less likely to engage in actions that would potentially increase their sense of control. Being drawn to conspiracy theories in the hope of making sense of the world and feeling more in control of your own destiny actually leave people feeling more disempowered than ever before in the long term. Stay tuned for more conspiracy theory debunking and subscribe to my channel, The Richard Cranium Show. Thank you for watching.